Hello and welcome to the Code Football channel. In this video, we present the tactics and style of play of Vincent Kompany. By the age of 38, Vincent Kompany had experienced a roller coaster start to his career as a head coach. Already laden with experience at the very highest level as a player, the Belgian established himself as one of the most promising young coaches in the game. And yet it was still a surprise when he was named Bayern Munich's head coach in 2024, coming after he had experienced the setback of Premier League relegation with Burnley. Kompany began his managerial career, as he did his playing days, with his boyhood club, Anderlecht. After 2 years in Brussels, he left to take over Burnley in the Championship, guiding them to immediate promotion and a title won in impressive style. His team struggled badly in the Premier League, however, and were relegated after spending the entire season in the bottom three. Nonetheless, with Bayern seeking a successor to Thomas Tuchel, Kompany was offered the chance to take over Germany's most successful club in the summer of 2024. Kompany has favored variations of 4-3-1 and D4-3-3 as a starting base for his teams while also playing a 4-4-2 in spells during his time at Anderlecht. The fluidity of his tactical approach, however, has ensured his teams rarely stay rigid in a structure. He wants his teams to dominate possession, commit numbers to the last line, and use an aggressive rest defense to suffocate the opposition and sustain attacks. This was evident during his championship-winning season at Burnley, where they registered the highest average possession 65% and the number of goals 87 in the division. The structure of his teams is fluid in the build phase, but they often create a 3-5 structure, with a back three and double pivot. In the example from Burnley, Ian Maatsen narrowed from left back, while Jordan Bayer became a middle centre-back, and Taylor Harwood-Bellis widened to become a right centre-back. Further ahead, Connor Roberts inverted from right back, forming a double pivot alongside Josh Cullen. This meant Burnley had a secure structure to build, including options to circulate across the back three while maintaining diagonal passing angles to retain and combine. It was a fluid structure, with Maatsen inverting at times to create the double pivot. When he did that, Roberts stayed deeper and narrower as part of the back three. Burnley's 3-5 could also form through a central midfielder dropping into the back three while the fullbacks advanced onto the last line to pin the opposition's defensive line. Midfielder Sander Berge drifted out to create the back three structure, with fullbacks Charlie Taylor and Vitinha out of the picture advanced high and wide on the last line. Wilson Odobert dropped down alongside Cullen to form the double pivot, with Jacob Bruun-Larsen and Lyle Foster narrowing into half-space positions. This ensured that Burnley occupied all 5 lanes on the last line, to provide a constant threat in behind. Again, this structure was fluid, with Cullen also able to drop deeper into the back line, both outside and between centre-back. A structural advantage of this shape was the flexibility of the inside forwards, Bruun-Larsen and Foster. When Kompany's teams require space in the build-up, players in these positions have tended to stay high and fix the opposition's back line to create space. They have also had the freedom to drift wider into the vacant space between wide centre-backs and high full-backs. Particularly against compact back five structures, this enables them to receive while facing forward, to penetrate. Alternatively, if they draw out a defender with their movement, it creates space in behind for high fullbacks to make aggressive out-2-in runs, for space for the central striker to make intelligent runs across on the blind side, in behind the opposition's defensive line. In especially aggressive moments, Kompany's teams can also operate as a 2-3-5. This involves the central midfielder staying in the second line, and fullbacks advancing higher to push the wide forwards inside, alongside the central striker, to occupy the last line. Alternatively, both fullbacks can invert into midfield, with the last line occupied by wide forwards, high central midfielders, and the central striker. Kompany maintained these themes during his early games in charge of Bayern. He adapted, though, to use the ability of goalkeeper Manuel Neuer between the centre-backs. With Neuer part of a back three alongside Dayot Upamecano and Kim Min-jae, Bayern was able to keep an additional outfield player in a higher position. Joshua Kimmich inverted into a double pivot alongside Alexander Pavlovic while Rafael Guerreiro advanced onto the last line. This narrowed Mathys Tel into the half-space position, with Kompany's Bayern have shown an additional degree of fluidity and flexibility. In the example, Jamal Musiala could drift wider to receive in space and travel forwards using his acceleration and dynamism, with Freiburg's backline pinned back and Pavlovic and Kimmich staying central to narrow and compact the opposition midfield. Alternatively, Allies could also drop down to create a central box alongside Musiala, Pavlovic and Kimmich, to overload Freiburg. Kompany looks to utilize his team's occupation of all 5 lanes of the pitch to create space between and in behind the opposition in the final third. The widest players, who can be advanced fullbacks or wide forwards, look to pin the width. This stretches the distances between the opposition's back line, creating space for runs into the half space by narrowed inside forwards or advanced midfielders. This allowed Burnley to exploit any space between opposition defenders, to slide passes in or cross behind the defense. If the opposition back line narrowed excessively to restrict central penetration, it allowed the wide players to attack the space on the outside, to cross or isolate defenders in 1v1 situations. Another way in which Burnley utilized their occupation of the last line was by opposite movements between the central striker and those occupying the half space. As a central striker, Ashley Barnes often looked to drop in and pull central defenders out of position or, at the very least, occupy their attention. Kompany's Burnley also used these opposite movements in wider areas, timing and disguising movements to exploit space when the opposition was drawn out. Without the ball, Kompany has preferred his teams to form a 4-4-2 shape, with the ability to press aggressively and drop into a more compact block when necessary. In aggressive presses, strikers in a 4-4-2 work together, with one pressing the center-back in possession to force one way while the other drops into a position to restrict the pivot. Central midfielders must possess the intelligence to position between midfielders. They must be able to jump and engage the deepest pivot if the first line is beaten, but also ensure they can screen midfielders on their blind side. In a more reserved and passive block, the front two will drop with a deeper line of engagement and prioritize screening the opposition's pivot. This enables the distances between the front two, midfield, and defensive units to remain minimal, limiting the space for the opposition to penetrate between. Instead, they should be forced into wider areas, from which Kompany's teams have looked to regain possession or force the opposition longer.